while we're waiting for the last few people to join, for any newbies on the call, I'll just quickly introduce myself. So my name's Jonathan Downs. I lead the policy team at Oldham Council, and Oldham, as accountable body, also have responsibility for chairing the officer network. So I will be your chair today. I feel like a pilot doing the introductory pre-takeoff speech. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, you can do that bit, Nicola. You can do the exits, emergency exits.
Okay. Yeah, I'm trying to. Well, not I'm trying to. I am working. We've got a amount of focus groups for the core office work.
Oh, we're now all looking to see who hasn't muted themselves and where's that noise coming from. Oh, it was Fiona.
Oh, sorry, it was me. Sorry, I'm on mute now. Sorry.
Right, I think we're on 11:35. So as always, to be respectful of everyone's time, because I'm aware everyone's really, really busy, especially now following the general election, we will make a start. So as you'll all be aware, we were due to have this meeting last week. However, given the general election, we decided to bump it to this week because the topic that we wanted to discuss and sort of open up to the floor today was around the outcomes of the general election and its potential implications for the network and for our members, and sort of where we can collectively push to make sure that cooperative working and the CCIN is now reflected, hopefully in government policy, but also where we all are as individual local authorities to share some of that knowledge and learning about where our heads are at and what we are thinking in terms of our own sort of internal policy development. And I'll be happy to share some of the thinking that we've been doing recently in Oldham following the general election, and of course on the run up to the general election, given that there was a lot of speculation about a Labour government. Just to say, obviously, it's clearly really good news for the Council's Innovation Network. There's a couple of people now who are in government who are very heavily involved in the network. Steve Reed, one of our honorary presidents, I think got the DEFRA portfolio, Nicola. We've got Jim McMahon, again, one of our honorary presidents who's been appointed Minister of State. So some really, really good hooks into government, so a real opportunity to, I think, start to shape some of the narrative around cooperatives and cooperative ways of working and what it really means to be a cooperative council and that point of difference. And I think we've got a really, really strong story to tell as a network about that. So today's conversation is really quite an open conversation about how we make the most of that now, given the fact that government is starting to set its policy direction. Jonathan Nunn was just saying before a few people joined the call that the pace of the new government's policy making already seems to be happening very, very quickly. So there's something about catching that wave and not letting the momentum move and us, I suppose, get left behind. So yeah, as a really quick introduction to the conversation, that's sort of where I'd like us to go today. And really just an opportunity before I start to sort of spout about some of the work that we've been doing in Oldham. Oh, and thank you, Nicola. Yes, Nicola's just put in the chat, of course, our chair, Councillor Louise Gittins, is now also leading the LGA. So even more hooks into to central government. But I just want to pause there and just open the floor for any initial observations or anything that people would like to discuss in relation to this topic, or any general observations at all would be really welcome. Stunned silence. I can see Jonathan Nunn's keen to contribute, but he started eating at exactly the time when I needed him to step in.
I've got to run out the door to get a train straight after this meeting, probably before it finishes, in fact. Thus my sandwich eating. There's some really obvious hooks in the manifesto and some others kind of less so, but they're potentially there by implication. The most obvious one is the commitment to double the size of the co-op economy, which comes from the NEF report, which is quite a few years old now. But that's obviously a major one. I think there's significant opportunities around the commitment to increase early years childcare. I think the manifesto is pretty sparse on it, but I heard a radio interview where they talked about essentially, well, schools have got the space, but no real answers in terms of, well, where are you going to find the 20,000 people that you're going to need to staff this new capacity across the country, and what is already a challenging recruitment environment, because they aren't great jobs with little progression, and particularly post-pandemic, a lot of pressure. And the work that I've been doing through the Policy Lab I commissioned a piece on the impacts of co-ops, which there's an absolute dearth of evidence in the UK, but that's turned up some material on childcare co-ops particularly in Canada and Australia, and one case where they're really actively promoted. So I think there's some really significant opportunities there, and you can go kind of line by line of why, if you want to increase renewable energy, involve communities. There's really strong evidence for that, and they talk about increasing wealth in all communities. They don't say community wealth building, but it's basically there. So I think working through what are the hooks, who are the appropriate ministers to be approaching, what work have we already got, and where would we want to say, well, go and see this in Dewsbury, or this in Telford, this in Cardiff, so that we can really tell the story and be really specific about who we're approaching and why.
I've muted myself. I've still not got used to it. After all these years of being on Teams, I still talk when I'm muted. It's ridiculous.
We've only been doing it for 4 years, Jonathan.
I know. I should learn. I think some really, really valuable observations there. And I think that point about, you sort of alluded to a bit of almost how local authorities have, I suppose, told the story about what the last 14 years under a Conservative government, and now a move to a Labour government, what that means. And one of the things I've come across recently, and I can see we've got a few colleagues from Liverpool on the call, Andy and Lucy, is the Liverpool Echo stuff around austerity Liverpool. I don't know if anyone else has seen that. I'll put a link in the chat, but a really sort of interesting way of presenting what it's been like over the past 14 years to sort of live, work in Liverpool, and how austerity's changed what the local authority's been able to do and deliver. And one of the things that we've been thinking about, following on almost as a bit of a copy of that from Liverpool's perspective, is we've been pulling together something similar from Oldham's perspective, which we're aiming to feed into government pretty quickly to try and help shape some of the narrative around what have the challenges really been for Oldham over the last 14 years. And I'm sure there's learning again. There'll be the same challenges across the piece, won't they, from all sort of local authorities. But I'd recommend looking at the Liverpool work in the chat. It really is interesting. Some of the other thoughts from sort of our perspective, just to some of the things that we've been sort of thinking about. and some of the stuff that we're planning on lobbying for as a local authority based on some of the recent changes. And I'd be interested to hear if other people's sort of politicians' heads are in this space at the moment. Of course, around sort of those historical funding levels. So the fact that the current funding formulas for local government still rely very heavily on historical spending patterns, which means that areas that historically receive less funding continue to do so, and that more deprived areas like Oldham and a lot of the councils we represent typically have lower funding and remain underfunded, which sort of perpetuates that cycle of deprivation. And obviously there is some stuff in the manifesto, the Labour manifesto, about that, but we're really keen to hammer that home and push that agenda forward. So we're starting to think about how we feed some of that into Jim McMahon. So if there's stuff that you have that you're looking to almost put into that you're looking to, I suppose, support that argument, we'd be really keen to hear about that too. Jonathan.
I think that's a really interesting point. I was at as part of our Business for Good West Yorkshire programme, there's been a couple of weeks of co-op visits to different co-ops across West Yorkshire, and I was at Holmfirth Tech on Friday, and Holmfirth is a pretty affluent area, and one of the people who was really behind driving it, getting going, made the point themselves about actually this would be really hard to do in a more deprived area. And I do wonder whether there's something about, well, actually, can we make that argument of we need the increased funding in these areas in order that we can support these kind of community initiatives, so that we can support effective co-production, and essentially, if you take it away from the places that have had the money because they're more affluent and they've been spending more money, well, they're going to manage to get by. It's the other places that really need it.
Because there used to be a poverty weighting, didn't there, in the local government funding formula pre-austerity, and that was taken out. From my understanding, anyway.
Yeah, it's not something I know much at all about, but it does remind me of a certain video that came out of a certain recent Prime Minister, talking about how funding had been biased towards more deprived places and that needed undoing.
Yeah. Clayton.
Yeah, these are more local examples and not explicitly tied to the change in central government. So I've kind of held off diving in, but a couple of kind of enabling things that are coming up in Oxfordshire, particularly at the moment, is that County Council in Oxfordshire have started to develop their own community wealth building strategy with advice from CLES. This is really a good opportunity for us because traditionally the county haven't had their own economic development team or kind of specific delivery arm, but now that they're absorbing the local enterprise partnership as part of that wider offer, they'll have a substantive team in the way that we do in City that we can collaborate with and work with around these agendas, but also hopefully then a very clear statement of their priorities and targets for community wealth building for the county. At a local level, also the Owned by Oxfordshire project, which is our community wealth building project in the city, is working out its theory of change and particularly its asks of key partners, so in the regional political landscape, but also potentially nationally. And so I think this is a really good moment for us. We're starting to see a bit of momentum build both across the city and the region around the community wealth building agendas particularly. Obviously, still need to do more to push with our members around the cooperative agenda more broadly as well, and some of the changes in local MPs and councillors as a result of the recent elections as well were beneficial in that regard. So yeah, just a few little sort of snippets of local insight, but hopefully part of a broader improving picture for us here.
Thanks, Clayton, and it'd be interesting to understand as well how many of our members are working with the likes of CLES around this agenda, because it's we've recently, interestingly, re-engaged CLES to do a similar piece of work for us. We'd done one probably 7 or 8 years ago now, but we recognise that the picture's changed quite dramatically. So we've got CLES back in to work with us. So it'd be interesting to perhaps have a session where we could share some knowledge in the future once some of that work has been completed.
Yeah, definitely. I think that'd be really interesting. We worked with Claire's quite closely when we were setting up our inclusive economy partnership in the city about 4 years ago. But it's really interesting to see that they're working directly with county on this. So yeah, it'd be good to see what emerges and share that with this group.
And I imagine Claire's will also have a few more hooks into government too, given their profile and sort of reputation. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
Sally.
Hello, everybody. I thought I'd come in because we are and have worked with Claire's. So they helped us to establish our community wealth building strategy here in Greenwich, and also establish our Anchored in Greenwich partnership. So essentially the partnership that's helping to steer the work of our community wealth building strategy. We're literally on the throes of launching our inclusive economy strategy, which comes from our community wealth building strategy. And we're doing some further work now with Claire's, because our Anchored in Greenwich partnership has been going for the past couple of years to really look at some pledges that we had made coming into our community wealth building strategy. Certainly around certain of the pillars of community wealth building. So looking at procurement, looking at good employment, those sorts of things, and seeing how far now the partnership has worked over the past couple of years. So we're certainly keeping a close eye on the manifesto and the changes that are coming about with interest and with excitement, to see really how we further the work that we're doing. So it's a case of watch this space. We're undergoing the review of our partnership, the Anchored in Greenwich partnership at the moment, to see how well we've achieved the outputs and outcomes of our charter that we set up over the next couple of months. So I'll be able to feed back about the success of our particular partnership. We also have a cooperative commission where we're looking at various elements of cooperation and actually how we can support development of co-ops here in Greenwich. So we'll be in a position to be able to feed back more about that as well. I think that's it from us at a local level, as opposed to looking at the sort of like the wider approach. Thank you.
Muted again. Thank you, Sally. That's great, and be really keen to hear more about that that sort of commitment to developing more cooperatives, and sort of what that looks like and how you are also measuring that. We've had a commitment to sort of developing cooperatives that sort of sat on our corporate performance report for a few years now. However, I'm never really sure what it actually is measuring or what it really means. So it'd be really good to hear about how you're making that a bit more real. That'd be really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, Jonathan, what we're doing with that, we're sort of incorporating it into what we call our wider generative economy. So we're looking at sort of voluntary community social enterprise sector as a whole. We've used some of our UK SPF monies to support development of the generative economy, especially cooperatives. And so it's really interesting to hear about the childcare elements within the manifesto, because that was one area that we were looking at in terms of developing cooperatives. So yeah, we'll keep you posted on our developments.
Oh, that's brilliant. Thank you. Any more observations? Jonathan, were you wanting to come back in?
Yeah, and there are a few other hooks that really came to mind as conversation went on. And just in terms of devolution, which we'd already mentioned earlier, I think there's a real opportunity for us to try and shape that agenda. It's got to involve co-production and really delivering on community power, and not just moving the power from technocrats in Westminster to technocrats in our town halls. And we've got resources like the work that it was Rochdale that led, I think, on the co-production work that published last year. Transforming Care has featured in the electoral campaign significantly, less so from Labour and more from the Lib Dems, but it's going to be on their shopping list certainly. And I was reminded in a conversation yesterday about Equal Care Co-op and the transformation that they're driving. They're currently growing. I was shocked by this. They're growing at 5 to 10% every month in terms of hours of care delivered, and had a month where they grew by 15%. So they're expecting, I think it's their 23-24 turnover to have reached 1.5 million. So they're becoming pretty significant. The other is talking about community wealth building strategies. It always strikes me that the fifth pillar around making financial power work for local places normally gets forgotten because it's quite tricky. And one of the initiatives that I've come across that really appears to address that or touch on that fairly effectively is the concept of credit clearing. So Local Loop, which is being piloted in Merseyside with support from Mutual Credit Services, if I've got that right, is really interesting. They've now got a 500k grant from Innovate UK to support that work. And I'm getting traction with that with West Yorkshire Combined Authority because they really see the potential impact for local businesses. And interestingly, the Labour manifesto includes something about getting big businesses to settle their invoices with smaller businesses more quickly, which historically has been proven just not to be very easy to get them to do because they don't really care, and reporting on it actually doesn't create any negative impact for them, but actually credit clearing allows businesses to get their invoices paid quicker without actually needing to move cash around. So that potentially gives an answer to a manifesto commitment that may otherwise be pretty tricky. And I think those are ones where they will be particularly open to more innovative solutions because actually when it comes to things that it turns out are really quite difficult, going to more radical solutions becomes really helpful.
Thanks, Jonathan. Nicola.
Hi, thanks. I just wanted to mention a couple of things. I did speak to Sarah Longlands, who's the CEO of CLES, at the Cooperative Congress last month in Birmingham. She was keen on doing more work together and maybe joining the network, which I was obviously very happy about. So we might want to, at some stage, invite her, if they do join, to come along to this meeting and talk about, you know, what they're doing with quite a few members from the last look at their website. I popped in the chat that we've also had the leaders, Paul Foster and Sean Davis, as two council leaders, have now become MPs. So we've got another couple of allies of the network. I've sent out now, and part of this is about profile building with the new cabinet and new MPs that are not necessarily part of our normal range. They've had copies of the case studies pack and a little congratulations note from Louisa over the last few days and next couple of days. If there's anybody in your own particular area, I popped this in the WhatsApp group on Friday or Saturday that you'd like us to send a pack out to. Could you let me know so that we can get those out of the way pretty early doors? So they've gone to police and crime commissioners, all of the council leaders with the exception of Kirklees. So I've not sent Kathy's yet. And what I was also thinking is there's loads of ideas here. We had a session this morning with Morgan from Cheshire West and Charlotte from Lewisham about the new strategy. We've got a report going to the next exec oversight committee, and it's obviously very early days, and there's loads of things that we would like to see that the government's doing, but also maybe as part of our new strategy, and whether it's time to bring some of these new things in. And obviously, if we do that, we need names to go next to them. So we've already talked about doubling the size of the co-op economy. There was our report as well as the NEF report, Co-ops Unleashed, early years childcare, renewable energy, and transforming care. And I wondered whether, having that in our heads and the strategy, we should also be thinking about, is there somebody that would like to volunteer to do an article for the next newsletter? Is there a council leader out there that would like to have something in the next newsletter about what these opportunities are? Louise is absolutely under the hammer, carrying so many hats at the moment. So if there's anybody, I'll gladly take, a nice blog on the website. I can share it on our LinkedIn platforms, but we can get it out to our members, an early response as to what this actually means. So I wanted to put my few requests out there as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Nicola. And I think, yeah, some really good thoughts there. And I wonder if, there's one of the things that we're planning on doing in Oldham, and this might be something we want to explore as a network, is we're actually arranging for Jim McMahon to come to our next Oldham partnership meeting to actually talk about how I suppose Labour's plans can help shape what we're thinking from a policy perspective in Oldham, but also to think about what we need from government going forwards. And I wonder if we could hold maybe a similar session. I'd suggest it would be a joint session, perhaps between the officer network and members, but there could be something really, really good there that we might look to do or arrange, and that would just give us a real opportunity to, I suppose, start that dialogue and that direct engagement, which I think we're going to probably have an opportunity to have a lot more of, not just with people like Jim, but probably with different government officials and departments too. Oh, sorry, you're muted, Nicola.
I'm doing the Jonathan, as it's now going to be known. It's so exciting, isn't it? We've never been in this position before where a lot of these people were already on our newsletter distribution lists. It's not like they've never heard of us. That's what's so exciting about it. But yeah, really, really happy. Absolutely.
One of the points that Jonathan Dunn made before, which I thought was really important, was that sort of that ability to invest in this kind of work, because we know that sort of cooperative working and cooperative approaches require real authenticity. When you do them, they can't be quick hits in and out of communities. And one of the things that we've been thinking about again, and that we're going to be lobbying and really asking for, is a lot more flexibility when it comes to funding and our funding allocations. So again, the current formulas that we believe, and the Liverpool work really echoed this, was they don't allow for that flexibility to address sort of sudden or unique local challenges. So, again, going back, I keep banging on about deprivation, but it is so important, isn't it? Deprived areas often face sudden increases in demand for services due to economic downturns or public health crises, thinking of cost of living crisis or COVID, very, in the recent past. And that doesn't tend to be reflected in funding allocation. So being able to use our funding to really think in a much more long-term way in how we start to break some of those cycles of deprivation or some of those inequalities that exist in our communities is going to be really key. But the only way to really do that is to completely rethink that funding formula to allow us to do the kind of work that we absolutely want to do on the ground. So yeah, that's one of the big sort of areas that I've been doing some work on for the past week, and I'd be really happy to sort of share that work once we've signed it off and sent it through to government, just so you can see what we are asking for from a local authority perspective and what we're sort of trying to push for and lobby for. Any other thoughts or observations on this particular topic? Sorry, Nicola, I think you muted again.
Jonathan's still got his hand up.
It's again.
Oh, sorry, Jonathan.
I was just thinking, we've talked about the number of people that we've got now with close relationships in cabinet, but Jim and Steve are obviously the key ones. Is it worth a conversation with Jim and Steve of actually, we see some really clear opportunities where the cooperative approach can really deliver benefits. We are in the process of mapping kind of work we've done against manifesto priorities, against the relevant ministers. What is the most effective way of doing this, of getting our voice into those discussions? Because we could say, well, actually, we haven't got a conference this year. We have.
We have.
Okay.
It's part of my any other business.
Oh, right. Okay. I didn't miss something in a newsletter then. I don't get a slap wrist. Well, I was going to say, instead of that, we could host some kind of policy roundtable that we invite the relevant ministers to. Would that be something that actually gained traction, or would that be whistling in the wind? So if we can have a conversation with Steve and Jim about what really are the effective ways to have these conversations and input into those discussions, which are, by the looks of things, going to move really quickly, what's the best way to do it? Just get straight answers from them.
No, it's a really valuable point, and there's probably something about also saying that, what are the opportunities for us as a network to pilot initiatives on behalf of the new government? What's the opportunity to align, for example, our policy labs and our prototypes to the new manifesto and what they're looking to achieve? How do we start to make those connections and become a real, I suppose, thought leader and for government in this space? Morgan.
Hi, apologies for arriving late and then for just jumping in. Just one query I had is I don't know what our links are, because there is the Cooperative Party with 43 MPs have been elected to Parliament. Is that what we're discussing at the moment? I wasn't sure. A couple of those names I know have been to conference before, but I don't know how well we can use that wider Cooperative Party membership or how linked in we are to that.
They do get our newsletters. I'm waiting for the Co-op Party to put the new, it's gone up from 34 to 43, I think, waiting for those names to appear on their website. And then they'll get the new packs as well. And we've got the Co-op Party that Richard McCready sits on Values and Principles Board. It's an interesting point that Jonathan Nunn made about annual conference, because I'm actually, we've mentioned it sort of in passing that we would definitely hold the next conference in London. I'm even more determined we're going to hold the next conference in London to make it easy for people to get out of Parliament and come to an event. And I've suggested to Louise, I'm waiting for her diary. We've already said she's got a new role now.
Good luck with her diary.
Yeah, I know. So I'm at the moment, what I've said to her is these are the members that we've got in London: Barking and Dagenham, Brent, Greenwich, Hackney, Hounslow, Lewisham, Newham and Westminster. Once I've got, and I think she's probably best placed in terms of her diary to know what other people might be doing at that time. So I don't want any, I don't want to suddenly find out that there's a big event on one of these days, but I'm looking for the last couple of weeks of November. so that it's not in December, because I don't think we'll get anybody to come along. And having it as a 2-day conference, so no exec oversight committee on the first day, a short opportunity for a tour, because I'm without having the host in place yet, so having a tour, having the conference start on the first day. Now that could be that sort of round table type discussion that we invite certain people to, so it might be open to all council leaders and policy officers, or we might just have see who wants to come along, because there's no whatever the phrase is about good ideas. And then having a reception, which would be another opportunity, but not having a dinner, because a dinner in London would be really expensive. So I'm trying to look at ways to make it work. I'm really keen on having something the last couple of weeks. I think Locality have got their conference the end of November, or second week of November, I think. And Stir to Action are doing something on the 3rd of December. So, and I know some people will want to do all of those things. So that's where I am. But I think that we should certainly, maybe a few of us put something together, some thoughts on what that might look like, and then I can go out to various offices and try and get something in the diary. But I also like, I think we've had like a 6 months of elections. We've got to hold our own elections, and I want to get those done so that we announce who the new people are at the annual conference, rather than, because we've got quite a few vacancies now across our governance, and I don't want to do lots of elections within a couple of months of each other. So I've held off on that. So there's a lot happening, and I love your ideas. Please don't worry about overloading me. I'll tell you if you are.
Thanks, Nicola. And that feels like a really exciting opportunity, doesn't it, to really kickstart a lot of what we've just been talking about, and to think about how, as you say, we get hopefully Jim and Steve and people like that, and Louise absolutely involved front and centre in those conversations and in that conference. So anything we can do to help when it comes to, things like Jim's diary anyway, we can definitely support, because we've got some really good links in there. So do call on us as needed. Jonathan.
Just thinking about capacity and the possibility of overloading Nicola. If things are going to move at pace and we need to work at real pace, I'm just wondering whether there might be the need to potentially even hire someone for a fixed period to actually do some supporting work on this. I don't know whether we can find some capacity within the organisation, within the councils, to do that. It may just be a matter of actually doing the initial mapping piece of work and then divvying some things up between us. But I could really see something like a cooperative policy pack that kind of says the overall, these are the things, and then 1-2 pages on what the opportunities are in each of those and what they might deliver and how you might get there.
Thanks, Jonathan. Any reflections, Nicola? No. Just on the support requirement more than anything. I was wondering if you had any views.
Yeah, it's that. Yeah, it's the legwork on putting those ideas together. I know some of you went through the manifestos with a fine-tooth comb, looking at Jonathan Nunn, and I was getting all of these notes, and bringing what what the government says they want to do and all the policy labs that we've done so far and what those opportunities are. We've got something in the strategy that says about making, bringing these policy labs are not just about doing a piece of work. They've got longevity to them. We had a quick win yesterday with the Wigan Policy Lab on AI. And it's because everything's about relationships. So Louise, in her new role, managed to get me the contact at the LGA who was leading on AI, and there's a meeting happening next week with Wigan. That wouldn't have happened before, not as quick as that. So Louise is very keen on her new role being about bringing people together. She's very much about values and principles. And she needs to have the sort of information that Jonathan Nunn's talking about. They need that as to this is how the network can help you, and these are the ideas, and this is what exists. We've done the first part of that by saying, hey, here we are, here's our latest case studies pack, but we got to keep that ball rolling. So and webinars are comparatively easier to organise than they are having a fixed meeting in a room somewhere that's got teas and coffees and room hire involved and technical equipment. So, and people can generally fit that, they'll find half an hour in their diaries if we've got some seeds of things that we would like to invite them to come along. So that's where I need the help. That's where you're the experts.
Great, thank you, Nicola. Just one other thing very quickly to say and make an observation about is obviously, yes, got the Loan Manifesto, but also we've also got the LGA white paper. Really important to think about the recommendations in that when we're sort of thinking in the round about all this kind of stuff. So I'm sure you've all looked at it and sort of thought about it in terms of its implications for your local authorities. But again, I think if we're all talking about this stuff and we're all thinking about where the opportunities are to get a fairer settlement for local government, or thinking about where the opportunities are to just add more value to local government from a central government perspective, I think that really helps to for us all to be having similar conversations and making similar asks. Are there any more observations? I'm very aware that it's still very early days, and obviously we've only had the general election last week, so it might be a case of we want to again revisit this conversation perhaps with someone like Jim in the room and maybe have a bit more of a Q&A where we do some pre-work and prep for that kind of session. But are there any more observations before we move on from this particular topic? No? Brilliant. Okay. Well, in that case, I'll move us on to the Nicola's update on new leaders in cabinet newsletter updates. Nicola, please.
Thank you. Oh, no, I'm not on mute. Thanks very much. I've already mentioned that we've had quite a period of settling in for new cabinets being decided. We've now got a couple of councils who no doubt are looking for new leaders from this week. If you haven't, I'm keen that our messages get out to the right people. If you've had a change in cabinet, can you let me know? And because I want to update our contact list before I send them out, and then everybody says, well, they're not in that role anymore, and they're not in that role anymore. I'd like to preempt that feeling of, oh my God, I wish I'd known. So if you can let me have those details, I would be very grateful. We talked at the last meeting about the newsletter updates. Just another request, make sure that I'll pop the link in the chat. If you've got new people to add on to the newsletter, Oxfordshire County Council have just joined the network, and if I could clone their officer lead, the number of people that have actually joined and signed up to get the monthly newsletter, been phenomenal from Oxfordshire. So you know, any help you can give me, that would be really good. Got a bit of feedback on the call if anybody hasn't muted themselves. So I'll put the newsletter link in the chat. If you've got anything for the future newsletters, I think it's Jenny from Hackney. I'll just mute her. I have the power. Anything for the next newsletter, that would be very welcome. Now Morgan's here. Morgan, Charlotte and I had a session this morning on the Knowledge Hub and the new strategy. If you've not already joined the Knowledge Hub, could you put that link into the chat, Morgan? So we haven't had much participation in the new Knowledge Hub. We are seeing whether this works as opposed to, as the LGA Knowledge Hub, as opposed to the WhatsApp groups where we can have more in-depth conversations and we can have thematic conversations. So if you haven't joined, we do want to hear from you, both what you think of it and whether you think it's something that we should be using going forward to speak to each other. And I've already sort of said in passing about the annual conference as well. So I'm looking at the last couple of weeks of November. When I have an idea of a date, I will ask our members in London if they would like to work with me on delivering this year's annual conference. If they have the capacity in terms of room and breakout rooms. And hopefully we'll all be going down to London at the end of the year. I'm going to give you some free time so you can get your Christmas shopping in if you want to add to the London economy on that, or go and see the lights. Trying to pick up on the feedback from last year's event, which was about more networking and having a longer conference, but conscious that accommodation costs in London are going to be more than they are in Sunderland. So trying to please everybody as much as possibly can. Has anybody got any questions on any of those things? Good. Oh, nice to see so many lanyards for the people, people that have got their cameras on.
Sorry.
Back to you, Jonathan. It probably didn't go very well in Costa this morning.
No, that's it. Just a few observations just based on sort of some of the things that you've just said, and a few links back across to the previous discussion as well, Nicola. I wonder, we've got so much really good content now from the past couple of years of doing policy labs and policy prototypes, and I know we've talked about sending the case studies booklet out, and that's going to be hitting all MPs' inboxes, which is really exciting and helps people understand what's going on, not just nationally, but also in their constituency, because I think a lot of MPs won't be aware of the really interesting cooperative work that's happening in their local area. So that's really exciting. But we've got so much really good video content about some of the policy labs and prototypes that we've had produced for us. I wonder if there's also a way now of making sure that we push that again through our various channels and think about how we tag in some of those new MPs too, to make sure that they're aware of some of that work and can reflect on it and think about how it fits with their portfolios or their positions, etc., etc. So yeah, that was just a quick reflection. Again, I think the annual conference will really give us an opportunity to do some of that too, but just lead on the run up to that, as I said at the start, not wanting to lose some of that early momentum. I think it'd be good to think about how we do that, and not just expecting you, Nicola, to do that, but all of us think about how we make the most of that opportunity. There was something else I was going to mention. Oh, also, I think one of the things that we're starting to also think about that I'd be interested to just get some maybe general thought on at a future meeting is we're starting to think about how we in Oldham perhaps organise almost what we're going to be calling like policy hackathons, where we're we're going to be bringing policymakers, sort of cooperators together, community leaders together to help brainstorm cooperative policy solutions to some of the challenges that we're facing. Would be really, I know it's an idea that's been done before. It's not new, but we'd be really interested in taking any learning that from anyone who's done this kind of approach before. And again, it might be something that we want to visit at a future meeting. We're going to be taking it around the new manifesto, which is why I bring it up today. We're going to be looking at the new manifesto and thinking about how, again, we make the most of that from Oldham's perspective, but happy to share some of the outcomes of that work as it progresses if colleagues are interested. Yeah, I think that probably covers what I wanted to sort of finish on. Is there anything else anyone wanted to update the group on before we finish? I know it's been a shorter Officer Network meeting today, but keen to give people time back if the conversation's run its course. So we'll move on to any other business. Is there anything else anyone wanted to raise? Any suggestions for topics for future meetings? If not, feel free to feed them through to myself or my colleague Adele. We're always really keen to make sure this is continuing to add value to your time, that when you come to these, you're hopefully taking some interesting ideas and thoughts away. So if there are topics or areas that you want to cover, we will do our best to find people who can speak about things. If you are doing really interesting stuff and you want to hear about how other people have done it before, don't hesitate to let us know, and we will try and find suitable speakers. If there's nothing else, I will let you all go and have 35 minutes of your time back. Hopefully time for some lunch and time for Jonathan Nunn to run and catch his train, which is even more of a positive. It's like we planned it. Well, thank you all so much, as always. Really appreciate the conversation and the call, and I will see you all next month.